What if every history book you've ever read is just a cover story?
Right. That is the massive underlying premise of the stack of documents we are looking at today.
Yeah, I mean, what if the last 2,000 years of human history, the rise and fall of empires, the brutality of the Dark Ages, the founding of America, and even, incredibly, the creation of Islam, weren't just random historical events?
Well, according to these sources, they weren't. They were all mathematically scripted.
Exactly. And what if all of it was orchestrated by a single hidden power operating entirely in the shadows?
It's a premise that completely shatters how most of us view the world, honestly. If you accept the thesis of the authors we are examining today, history isn't just a series of accidents or, natural political evolution.
No, it's a highly choreographed script.
Precisely.
So today, we're welcoming you, the listener, into what is undeniably one of the most intense, heavily layered, and frankly controversial deep dives we have ever attempted.
Oh, absolutely. It's dense.
It really is.
Yeah.
But I know you're here because you have that desire to understand complex, heavy information without feeling overwhelmed, and today we're going to deliver exactly that.
We're opening up a blueprint, basically, one that claims to map ancient biblical prophecies directly to the history of the Vatican, the Roman Catholic Church, and various secret societies.
But before we read a single historical date or open the ancient texts, we have to lay down the ground rules for this specific deep dive.
Yes, this is crucial. We have a mandatory impartiality disclaimer here. The sources provided for our exploration today are exclusively and aggressively critical of the Vatican. They contain highly politically and religiously charged viewpoints.
Very charged.
I mean, some of these texts refer to the papacy as the Antichrist, as the whore of Babylon, and they implicate the Vatican in sweeping, terrifying global conspiracies.
So we need to explicitly state right up front, we are not taking sides.
Not at all.
We're not endorsing these viewpoints in any way, shape, or form. Our job today is strictly to act as your impartial guides.
We're just putting on the investigative frame.
Exactly. We are going to unpack the arguments, the historical claims, and the theological connections made by these specific authors so that you can understand the exact case they are presenting.
We are basically holding their blueprint up to the light and tracing the lines they've drawn. Nothing more, nothing less.
And wow, what a staggering blueprint it is. Because once you see how these authors connect the dots, it is genuinely mind-bending.
It really is. We're talking about a literal 1,260-year countdown hidden in ancient texts.
We're talking about a literal war on the written word where translating a book was treated as a capital offense.
Yeah, the unpardonable crime.
Right. And we're going to dive into the mathematical calculations of the number 666, the claim that Protestant America is prophesied to be the enforcer for a global papal empire.
And this is the wildest part?
Yeah, perhaps the most shocking claim of all, the assertion that the Vatican secretly orchestrated the creation of Islam.
It is a massive, sprawling narrative. But to understand how they build this case, you really can't start in the modern era.
No, you have to start where they start, building a visual, chronological foundation in the ancient world, specifically in the book of Daniel.
Right. We are starting in Daniel chapter 2. The setting is the Babylonian Empire around 600 BC.
King Nebuchadnezzar is the most powerful man on the planet, and he has a dream that absolutely terrifies him.
But there's a catch, right?
A huge catch. He either can't remember it, or he refuses to tell his advisors what it was, yet he demands they interpret it anyway.
Which is, impossible.
Completely. So I'm going to read these verses in their entirety from the New International Version, just to ensure we are working from the exact text these authors use. I'll start with Daniel 2, verses 1 through 3.
Go for it.
In the second year of his reign, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams. His mind was troubled, and he could not sleep. So the king summoned the magicians, enchanters, sorcerers, and astrologers to tell him what he had dreamed.
Setting the scene.
Right. When they came in and stood before the king, he said to them, I have had a dream that troubles me, and I want to know what it means.
You can just feel the tension there. He's demanding the literal impossible. And when his wise men predictably fail, he orders all of them executed.
Just a casual mass execution.
Exactly. And this is where the prophet Daniel steps in. He asks for time, praise, and God reveals both the dream and its meaning to him.
Which brings us to Daniel 2, verses 27 through 30. Daniel stands before the king.
Let's hear it.
Daniel replied, No wise man, enchanter, magician, or diviner can explain to the king the mystery he has asked about. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries.
Setting the record straight.
Yeah. He has shown King Nebuchadnezzar what will happen in days to come. Your dream and the visions that pass through your mind as you lay on your bed are these. As you were lying there, Your Majesty, your mind turned to things to come, and the revealer of mysteries showed you what is going to happen.
Notice how he emphasizes things to come. This is about the future.
Right. As for me, this mystery has been revealed to me, not because I have greater wisdom than anyone else alive, but so that Your Majesty may know the interpretation and that you may understand what went through your mind.
And here is where I really want you, the listener, to start painting a picture in your mind's eye.
Yeah, a visual timeline.
Because according to our sources, what Daniel describes next is the literal structural framework for all of world history, from 605 BC all the way to the end of the world.
Let's build the statue, Daniel 2, verses 31 through 33. Your Majesty looked, and there before you stood a large statue, an enormous, dazzling statue, awesome in appearance.
A massive visual.
The head of the statue was made of pure gold, its chest and arms of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of baked clay.
Notice the degradation of the metals there.
Gold to silver, silver to bronze.
Exactly. Down to iron and then a mixture of iron and clay. The metals decrease in value, but they actually increase in strength and hardness right up until the feet.
And the authors of our sources emphasize that we don't have to guess what this means, right?
No guessing required. Because Daniel explicitly decodes it as a chronological timeline of global empires.
Let's read the decoding, verses 36 through 38.
Okay.
This was the dream, and now we will interpret it to the king. Your Majesty, you are the King of Kings. The God of heaven has given you dominion and power and might and glory. In your hands he has placed all mankind and the beasts of the field and the birds in the sky. Wherever they live, he has made you ruler over them all. You are that head of gold.
So, boom, we have our anchor. The head of gold is the Babylonian Empire.
Clear as day.
In the historical timeline, Babylon reigned as the supreme world power from roughly 605 BC to 539 BC. It was the golden city of the ancient world. But Daniel tells the king it's not going to last forever.
Right, he continues in verses 39 and 40. After you, another kingdom will arise, inferior to yours. Next, a third kingdom, one of bronze, will rule over the whole earth.
That's the silver and the bronze.
Finally, there will be a fourth kingdom, strong as iron, for iron breaks and smashes everything, and as iron breaks things to pieces, so it will crush and break all the others.
Let's map these out according to the historical blueprint the authors provide.
Okay, so the chest and arms of silver.
That represents the empire that conquered Babylon in 539 BC, which is the Medo-Persian Empire. Notice it has two arms, the Medes and the Persians, a dual kingdom. They rule until 331 BC.
Wow, even the anatomy matches. Then comes the belly and thighs of bronze.
That is the Grecian Empire. Alexander the Great sweeps across the known world, conquering the Medo-Persians in 331 BC.
And the Greeks were famous for their bronze, right?
Exactly. They use bronze armor, bronze shields, bronze swords. It is a perfect historical match. They rule until 168 BC. And then we hit that fourth kingdom, the legs of iron.
Strong as iron. It will crush and break all the others. That sounds entirely ruthless.
The sources are absolutely unanimous on this point. The legs of iron represent the Roman Empire. Rome conquered Greece in 168 BC.
And Rome was the iron monarchy.
They didn't just conquer, they crushed. They assimilated. They ruled with an iron fist until their decline and eventual fall in 476 AD.
But the statue doesn't end at the iron legs. It has feet. It has toes. And this is where the history completely shifts gears.
The crucial pivot.
Let's read Daniel 2, verse 41. Just as you saw that the feet and toes were partly of baked clay and partly of iron, so this will be a divided kingdom, yet it will have some of the strength of iron in it, even as you saw iron mixed with clay.
This is a massive pivot point in the prophecy, and honestly, in world history. Up until this point, it has been one global superpower conquering another.
Right, Babylon conquered by Medo-Persia, Medo-Persia conquered by Greece, Greece conquered by Rome.
But Rome doesn't get conquered by a fifth global empire.
Of fractures.
Exactly. The iron mixes with clay. It breaks apart from the inside. When the Roman Empire collapsed in 476 AD, it was overrun by barbarian tribes from the north and east.
And the authors point out an incredible detail about those tribes.
Yes, the Roman Empire divided into exactly 10 primary barbarian kingdoms, 10 toes on the statue, 10 divided nations of Europe.
Let's read verses 41 and 42 together, as the sources really highlight them. As the toes were partly iron and partly clay, so this kingdom will be partly strong and partly brittle.
And then verse 43,
And just as you saw the iron mixed with baked clay, so the people will be a mixture and will not remain united, any more than iron mixes with clay.
Will not remain united. The sources point out how many times historical figures have tried to unite Europe back into one massive empire.
Charlemagne tried it, Napoleon tried it, Hitler tried it.
But the prophecy said the iron and clay will not mix. The nations of Europe will remain divided, some strong like iron, some brittle like clay, right up to the present day.
Okay, so that sets the chronological stage. We have Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, and then the fractured nations of Europe.
Right.
But our sources argue that Daniel gives us a parallel vision in chapter 7. It covers the exact same timeline, but instead of a metal statue, we get a series of strange, terrifying beasts.
And this is where the specific accusations against the Vatican begin to truly take root in the texts.
The metal statue was political history.
Exactly, whereas the beasts of Daniel 7 introduce the spiritual and religious conflict happening behind the scenes of those political empires.
Let's jump into Daniel 7, verses 1 through 3. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream, and visions passed through his mind as he was lying in bed.
Same prophet, different vision.
He wrote down the substance of his dream. Daniel said, "In my vision at night I looked, and there before me were the four winds of heaven churning up the great sea. Four great beasts, each different from the others, came up out of the sea."
Before we look at the specific beasts, we have to define the symbols the authors are using.
Right, the prophetic language.
Drawing from other parts of the Bible, like Revelation 17.15, seas, or waters, represent heavily populated areas, multitudes, nations, and languages.
And the winds?
Winds in prophecy represent war, strife, and political upheaval. So, out of the warring, striving nations of the earth, four great empires arise.
I'll read the descriptions of the beasts, Daniel 7.4. The first was like a lion, and it had the wings of an eagle. I watched until its wings were torn off, and it was lifted from the ground so that it stood on 2 feet like a human being, and the mind of a human was given to it.
The lion is Babylon, the head of gold. Winged lions were literally a dominant architectural symbol in ancient Babylon. You can see them in museums today.
Verse 5. And there before me was a second beast, which looked like a bear. It was raised up on one of its sides, and it had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. And it was told, "Get up and eat your fill of flesh."
The bear is Medo-Persia, the chest of silver. It's raised up on one side because the Persians were stronger than the Medes.
And those 3 ribs in its mouth.
The sources note that Medo-Persia conquered exactly 3 major provinces to establish its dominance: Babylon, Lydia, and Egypt.
That level of detail is just wild. Let's look at the third beast, verse 6. After that I looked, and there before me was another beast, one that looked like a leopard.
The Greek Empire.
And on its back it had 4 wings like those of a bird. This beast had 4 heads, and it was given authority to rule.
The leopard is Greece, the belly of bronze. A leopard is incredibly fast, and with 4 wings, it represents the blazing speed of Alexander the Great's conquests.
He conquered the known world in, just about a decade?
Yeah, incredibly fast. But Alexander died young, and his empire didn't go to one successor. It was divided among his 4 top generals: Cassander, Lysimachus, Seleucus, and Ptolemy. Hence, the 4 heads of the leopard.
Which brings us to the fourth beast, Daniel 7.7. After that, in my vision at night I looked, and there before me was a 4th beast, terrifying and frightening and very powerful.
The Iron Monarchy returns.
Had large iron teeth. It crushed and devoured its victims and trampled underfoot whatever was left. It was different from all the former beasts, and it had 10 horns.
Notice the language there, iron teeth. It directly mirrors the iron legs of the statue. This is the Roman Empire.
But just like the statue didn't end with the legs, this beast doesn't end with its head. It has 10 horns.
Let's read the angel's explanation.
Let me read Daniel 7.17, which gives the initial summary. The 4 great beasts are 4 kings that will rise from the earth. And then the angel explains the 4th beast specifically in verses 23 and 24.
This is the key.
He gave me this explanation. The 4th beast is a 4th kingdom that will appear on earth. It will be different from all the other kingdoms and will devour the whole earth, trampling it down and crushing it. The 10 horns are 10 kings who will come from this kingdom. After them, another king will arise, different from the earlier ones. He will subdue 3 kings.
Okay, let's unpack this carefully because this is the absolute bedrock of the entire conspiracy the sources are alleging.
Right.
The 10 horns on the Roman beast parallel the 10 toes on the statue. When the Roman Empire fell in 476 AD, it broke into 10 barbarian kingdoms.
And the authors list them explicitly, right?
Yes. The Anglo-Saxons, who became the English.
Right.
The Franks, the French, the Alemanni, the Germans, the Lombards, the Italians, the Visigoths, the Spanish, the Burgundians, the Swiss, the Suevi, the Portuguese.
7.
Right.
But there were 10. So what happened to the other 3?
This is where history gets incredibly bloody, and where the sources identify their primary antagonist. The text says another king, a little horn, will arise among the 10, and it will subdue or uproot 3 of the original horns.
Let me read the exact verse for that, Daniel 7:8. While I was thinking about the horns, there before me was another horn, a little one, which came up among them, and 3 of the first horns were uprooted before it.
The little horn.
This horn had eyes like the eyes of a human being and a mouth that spoke boastfully.
According to these fiercely critical texts, this little horn is the papacy, the Roman Catholic Church.
Wait, hold on. Let me step into the shoes of the skeptic here for a second.
Please do.
We're talking about a prophetic relay race. The baton of global power is passing from the pagan Roman Empire to, well, a church.
Right.
How exactly does a religious institution manage to act as a political, empire-toppling superpower? Because the text says it uprooted 3 massive barbarian kingdoms.
It's a fantastic question, and the sources spent a lot of time answering it by diving into the geopolitical landscape of the 5th and 6th centuries.
Okay, walk us through it.
As the pagan Roman Empire collapsed, the Bishop of Rome started filling the power vacuum. But this rising papacy faced a massive theological and military problem. 3 of those 10 barbarian tribes, the Heruli, the Vandals, and the Ostrogoths, were Arian Christians.
Arian Christians. Break that down for us.
Simply put, Arianism was a theological belief that rejected the mainstream Catholic doctrine of the Trinity. They didn't believe Jesus was co-eternal and equal with God the Father.
Ah.
And because of this theological rift, these 3 tribes absolutely refused to recognize the authority of the Bishop of Rome. They were a direct threat to the Pope's rising political and spiritual dominance.
So what does a rising political power do with a threat?
It eradicates it. The sources detail how the papacy used proxy armies to destroy them. They allied with the Catholic Emperor Justinian of the Eastern Roman Empire.
The Byzantines.
Exactly. Justinian's armies, led by his brilliant general Belisarius, waged brutal wars of extermination against these 3 Arian tribes on behalf of the Catholic faith.
And the authors provide the exact dates for this, right?
Yes, they do. The Herulis were decimated in 493 AD. The Vandals in North Africa were crushed in 534 AD. And the final, most powerful tribe occupying Italy, the Ostrogoths, were defeated and driven out of Rome in 538 AD.
3 horns, permanently uprooted from history.
538 AD. That year is highlighted, circled, and underlined in these documents.
It is the anchor point for their entire prophetic timeline. By uprooting the 3rd horn in 538 AD, the sources argue that the papacy was now the undisputed religious and political dictator of the old Roman world.
Emperor Justinian actually issued a decree officially recognizing the Pope as the head of all holy churches and the corrector of heretics. The baton was officially passed. The little horn was fully in power.
So why does all of this ancient history matter to you, the listener, today? Because the authors of these sources believe that identifying the little horn is the key to understanding everything that has gone wrong in the world since.
Which brings us to the prophetic math of the 1260 years.
And a devastating period of history the sources characterized by what they call the unpardonable crime.
Right. Once the little horn, the papacy, comes to full power in 578 AD, Daniel predicts exactly what this entity will do and precisely how long it will hold absolute, terrifying dominion over Europe.
I am going to read Daniel 7.25 in its entirety from the NIV. This is the verse that outlines the little horn's actions.
This is a heavy one.
He will speak against the Most High and oppress his holy people and try to change the set times and the laws. The holy people will be delivered into his hands for a time, times, and half a time.
Let's do the prophetic math because the sources are incredibly rigid about this calculation. The text says a time, times, and half time.
Okay, lay it out.
In biblical prophecy, according to these authors, a time represents a prophetic year of 360 days. So 1 time is 360 days. Times, plural, meaning 2, is 720 days. And half a time is 180 days.
So 360 plus 720 plus 180 equals exactly 1,260 days.
Exactly. And here is where the authors apply a vital biblical rule found in Ezekiel 4.6 and Numbers 14.34, which is the day for a year principle.
The day for a year.
Yes. In large-scale prophetic timelines, one prophetic day equals one literal historical year. So this prophecy dictates that the little horn will rule with absolute supremacy for exactly 12,260 years.
Okay, let's map that to the history we just discussed. If the little horn takes full temporal power in 538 AD, when the Ostrogoths are driven out of Rome.
Keep 1798 in your mind. We are going to come back to that exact year.
Mm.
But first, we have to look at what Daniel 7.25 says this power will actually do during those 12,260 years.
The era we commonly call the Dark Ages.
The verse says it will try to change the set times and the laws and oppress his holy people. Let's start with changing the laws. The sources are fiercely focused on this accusation. They argue that the Roman Catholic Church openly and even boastfully admits to altering the Ten Commandments.
Specifically, the fourth commandment regarding the Sabbath.
This is a major theological pillar for these authors. The biblical text states clearly that the seventh day, Saturday, is the Sabbath, a memorial of creation.
Right.
But the sources claim the papacy, drawing from ancient Babylonian and pagan sun worship practices, moved the day of rest and worship to the first day of the week, Sunday, the venerable day of the sun.
And what's wild is that the sources don't just point to history books for this. They quote Catholic catechisms. They quote official church authorities, basically saying, yes, we changed the day of worship by our own divine authority. And the fact that the whole Protestant world observes Sunday instead of Saturday is proof that they actually recognize the supreme authority of the Catholic Church.
It's presented as the ultimate usurpation. The little horn claims the authority to overwrite the written law of God.
Wow. But the second part of Daniel 7.25 is even darker. It says he will oppress his holy people.
The sources argue this predicts the horrors of the Inquisition, where millions of people who refused to bow to papal authority were tortured and killed.
But the primary weapon in this oppression, according to the documents, wasn't just the rack or the Iron Maiden or the stake. It was a systematic, centuries-long war on the written word.
The systematic suppression of the Bible.
This is the core psychological control mechanism the authors highlight. Think about the socioeconomic reality of the Dark Ages. You have a largely illiterate peasant class and a church hierarchy that holds all the keys to salvation.
If the masses only hear scripture in Latin, a language they cannot speak or read, then the priests are the sole arbiters of reality.
It's the ultimate monopoly on truth.
Precisely. If you control the information, you control the population. The hierarchy maintains absolute, unquestioned power. But if the common person can read the Bible for themselves, the illusion shatters.
They could read the Ten Commandments and see the discrepancy about the Sabbath.
And more dangerously for the Vatican, the sources argue that if the masses could read Daniel chapter 7 in their own language, they would immediately recognize the papacy as the little horn.
They would see the exact prophetic description of the power ruling over them.
Which is why translating the Bible into the common tongue was treated as the ultimate heresy. The authors call it the unpardonable crime. The Vatican knew exactly what was in the book, and they knew it exposed them.
The sources detail the lengths the church went to in order to keep the Bible hidden. They cite the Council of Toulouse in 1229, quoting its decree that strictly forbade laymen from owning copies of the Old or New Testaments in the vulgar or common tongue.
Pope Gregory VII flat out refused requests to allow church services in the language of the people, stating that it pleased God that the scriptures be hidden so they wouldn't be misunderstood or held in contempt by the uneducated.
But people wanted to read it. And this brings us to the horrifying fates of the translators. Men whose only crime was wanting a plowboy to be able to read the words of Jesus.
We have to talk about them as the sources dedicate significant time to their stories. John Wycliffe, the morning star of the Reformation, who translated the Bible into English.
The church hated him so much that decades after he died, they dug up his bones, burned them, and threw the ashes into a river.
Then there was John Hus. He translated the Bible into the Bohemian tongue. The sources describe how he was summoned to the Council of Constance under a promise of safe conduct, which was immediately broken.
He was condemned as a heretic and burned alive at the stake.
The imagery the authors use is haunting. They describe wagons upon wagons of his literature, his translated Bibles, being dragged into city squares and fed into blazing bonfires while the heavy toll of church bells rang out.
They detail the massive bonfires of Bibles in Rome's Campo dei Fiori and at Wittenberg. It wasn't just censorship, it was an attempt at complete eradication.
And we cannot forget William Tyndale.
Oh, Tyndale's story is incredible.
The sources focus heavily on his English New Testament. Bishop Tonstal of London issued a massive injunction in 1526 against Tyndale's translation, calling it pestiferous and most pernicious poison.
He commanded that all copies be surrendered within 30 days under pain of excommunication and suspicion of heresy.
Tyndale had to live on the run, a fugitive across Europe, just to keep printing the Bible. He was eventually betrayed, strangled, and his body was burned at the stake.
A Catholic doctor of divinity quoted in the sources actually defends the burning of Tyndale's Bibles, claiming it wasn't God's book at all but the devil's word.
I mean, the psychological terror of a system that burns you alive simply because you want to read a book in English, well, it's staggering.
The authors present this blood-soaked history to make a definitive point. The papacy fulfilled the prophecy of Daniel 7.25 to the letter. They changed the times and laws regarding the Sabbath, and they wore out the saints through the Inquisition and the violent suppression of the Word of God.
So if they're ruling with absolute iron terror, we have to look back at that mathematical countdown.
538 AD plus 12,260 years equals 1798 AD.
According to the prophetic math, the absolute temporal power of the little horn had to end in that exact year.
The question is, did it?
According to the sources, it ended with stunning mathematical precision. Let's look at the geopolitical landscape of 1798. Europe is in the throes of the French Revolution.
Right.
The French have thrown off the yoke of the monarchy and the Catholic Church, and in 1798, Napoleon's General Berthier marches his army right into Rome.
Yeah, what does he do?
He captures Pope Pius VI, he dethrones him, strips him of his temporal power, and banishes him into exile in France, where the Pope later dies.
Wow.
For the first time in over a millennium, the dictatorial power of the papacy over the nations of Europe was broken. The 12,260 years were over.
Okay, this is where the narrative transitions in a fascinating way. Because the sources argue that the book of Revelation, written by the Apostle John hundreds of years after Daniel, picks up this exact same storyline.
We are moving from the Old Testament to the New Testament, but the target remains exactly the same.
Let's read Revelation 13, verses 1 and 2. The dragon stood on the shore of the sea, and I saw a beast coming out of the sea.
The sea again. Populated areas.
Right. It had 10 horns and 7 heads with 10 crowns on its horns, and on each head a blasphemous name. The beast I saw resembled a leopard, but had feet like a bear and a mouth like a lion.
Look at how John is weaving the imagery together. He sees a beast with the mouth of a lion, the feet of a bear, and the body of a leopard.
He is looking backward down Daniel's timeline.
He is seeing the composite of the Babylonian lion, the Medo-Persian bear, and the Grecian leopard.
The dragon gave the beast his power and his throne and great authority, and this composite beast inherits its power from the dragon. Who is the dragon?
In Revelation 12, the dragon is explicitly identified as Satan. But the sources argue that Satan operates through earthly kingdoms, and historically, the dragon power that tried to kill baby Jesus and persecuted the early church was pagan Rome.
So pagan Rome gave its power, its seat, the city of Rome itself, and its great authority to this new composite beast.
Which is Papal Rome, the
Yeah.
Roman Catholic Church.
Exactly. Now let's look at the timeline connection. I'll read Revelation 13, verses 4, and then 5 through 7.
Okay.
Verse 4. People worshiped the dragon because he had given authority to the beast, and they also worshiped the beast and asked, who is like the beast? Who can wage war against it?
And verses 5 through 7.
The beast was given a mouth to utter proud words and blasphemies, and to exercise its authority for 42 months. It opened its mouth to blaspheme God and to slander his name and his dwelling place and those who live in heaven. It was given power to wage war against God's holy people and to conquer them, and it was given authority over every tribe, people, language, and nation.
Do you see the math there? Revelation says this beast will exercise authority for 42 months. Let's do the calculation. 42 prophetic months multiplied by 30 days per month equals exactly 12,260 days.
It is the exact same 12,260-year timeline from Daniel 7.
It's the same era of persecution, the same blasphemy, the same war against the saints.
But Revelation adds a crucial, shocking detail about how this period ends. Revelation 13.3 says, one of the heads of the beast seemed to have had a fatal wound, but the fatal wound had been healed. The whole world was filled with wonder and followed the beast.
The fatal wound. The authors argue this wound was dealt precisely in 1798 when General Berthier took the Pope captive.
Right, the 12,260 years ended, and the beast was seemingly dead as a political superpower. The world thought the papacy was finished as a force in global politics.
But the prophecy explicitly states the wound would be healed, and the authors point to a specific historical event for this healing. February 11th, 1929, the Lateran Treaty, also known as the Concordat.
Let's give some context here. What was happening in 1929 Italy?
You have the rise of fascism. Benito Mussolini is consolidating power in Italy, but he needs the support of the massive Catholic population. So he signs a treaty with Pope Pius XI.
And what does the treaty do?
This treaty officially recognized Vatican City as a fully sovereign independent state. It gave the papacy back its temporal power, its land, its political independence. The authors argue that at that exact moment, the deadly wound was healed.
The papacy stepped back onto the world stage, not just as a church, but as a sovereign nation-state, ready to resume its quest for global dominance.
And this brings us to one of the most famous and infamous parts of the Book of Revelation. Because chapter 13 doesn't just give us a timeline of this beast, it gives us a specific mathematical identifier.
Let's read Revelation 13.18 in its entirety. This calls for wisdom. Let the person who has insight calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. That number is 666.
The number 666. It's permeated pop culture, usually associated with some kind of supernatural monster. But the sources take this injunction to calculate the number very literally and very mathematically.
They argue that the papacy, which has deep roots in the ancient mystery religions of Babylon, is branded with this numerical identifier across its history, its geography, and its official titles.
Let's walk through their math slowly, because it is fascinating to see how they build this case using Roman numerals, Greek, and Latin. Let's start with the official title of the Pope.
The sources cite Catholic publications, including a 1914 issue of Our Sunday Visitor, stating that the title inscribed on the Pope's mitre is Vicarius Filii Dei,
which translates to Vicar of the Son of God.
Okay, so if we take the letters of that title that have actual Roman numeral values, let's do the math.
Walk us through it.
In Vicarius, V is 5, I is 1, C is 100, A and R have no value, I is 1, U, which in ancient Latin is calculated as V, is 5, S has no value, that subtotal is 112.
Okay, 112.
In Philly, F has no value, I is 1, L is 50, I is 1, I is 1, that subtotal is 53.
Got it.
In DD is 500, E has no value, I is 1, that subtotal is 501. So 112 plus 53 plus 501 equals exactly 666.
Now, you might say, well, you could probably make a lot of names add up to that if you try hard enough, but the authors don't stop there.
No, they don't.
They point out that the beast is a Latin power. The papacy uses Latin, the language of the ancient Romans. In Greek, the language the New Testament was written in, the word for Latin man or Latin-speaking man is Latinos.
And Greek letters have numerical values, too.
Right. In the ancient world, if you take the Greek letters in, Latinus lambda is 30, alpha is 1, tau is 300, epsilon is 5, iota is 10, nu is 50, omicron is 70, sigma is 200. They add up to exactly 666.
Okay, that's two separate calculations.
Let's do a third. The beast is geographically located in Italy. The Greek phrase for Italian church is Italica Ecclesia. If you calculate the Greek numerical values of the letters in that phrase, the sum is, again, exactly 666.
Why?
The authors are building a compounding case. From its blasphemous title to its Latin language to its geographic origin in Italy, the papacy mathematically aligns with the biblical identifier of the beast.
It's an overwhelming amount of circumstantial and mathematical evidence they compile. But just when you think you have the narrative pinned down, Revelation 13 introduces a massive plot twist.
Because there isn't just one beast in this chapter, there's a second beast.
Let's read the source's interpretation of Revelation 13.11. Then I saw a second beast coming out of the earth. It had two horns like a lamb, but it spoke like a dragon.
We need to look at the contrasting symbolism here. Remember, the first beast, the papacy, came up out of the sea. The sea represents heavily populated areas, the dense, warring nations of Europe.
But this second beast comes up out of the earth, meaning what?
The sources interpret the earth to mean the exact opposite of the sea, a relatively unpopulated, sparsely inhabited, newly discovered area of the world.
Okay.
Furthermore, the timeline is crucial. John sees this second beast rising to power right around the time the first beast receives its deadly wound.
So we are looking for a nation rising in a sparsely populated continent around the year 1798. And the sources identify this second beast as Protestant America, the United States.
Which is a deeply jarring claim.
I have to push back hard here. America. A nation literally founded on the principles of religious freedom. A nation established by Protestants who were fleeing the very papal persecution in Europe that we just spent half an hour discussing.
It seems contradictory, I know.
How on earth does a country founded as a sanctuary become the enforcer for the Vatican? The text says it has horns like a lamb, but speaks like a dragon. How does a lamb become a dragon?
The sources outline a very specific and insidious mechanism for this transformation. They agree that America has lamb-like horns. Those horns represent its youthfulness, its innocence, and its foundational twin pillars of civil and religious liberty. A state without a king and a church without a pope. It was a lamb.
But then it speaks.
Yes. How does a nation speak? A nation speaks through its legislative laws and judicial decisions. The authors argue that apostate Protestantism in America will eventually betray its foundational principles of freedom through what the sources call the ecumenical movement. Think of it like a massive corporate merger, but for religion. American Protestant churches, which once vehemently opposed Rome, will slowly abandon their historical protests.
Right.
They will compromise their doctrines for the sake of unity and political power. They will unite with the Roman Catholic Church, creating an image to the first beast, a union of church and state. And once they have that consolidated political power, they will use the American legislative system to enforce their shared religious dogma.
And what dogma is that? What is the mark of the beast that this second beast will enforce upon the world? Because according to these texts, the mark is not a literal barcode tattooed on your forehead, and it's not a microchip implanted in your hand.
No. The sources argue that the mark is entirely spiritual, yet heavily enforced by the state. It all goes back to the changing of the law we discussed in Daniel 7. The mark of the beast is a symbol of allegiance.
Remember how the papacy claims it changed the Sabbath from Saturday to Sunday by its own divine authority, and uses Protestant observance of Sunday as proof of their submission?
Yes, the venerable day of the sun. The sources argue that Sunday worship, when enforced by law, is the ultimate mark of papal authority.
So how does America enforce this?
The authors predict that the United States, the lamb that speaks like a dragon, will eventually pass national Sunday laws, often referred to historically as blue laws. Due to perceived moral decay or national crises or natural disasters, the religious right will unite with the state to legally mandate rest and worship on Sunday.
And Revelation 13 says that no one will be able to buy or sell unless they have the mark.
Right. It becomes a massive economic boycott. You won't be able to hold a job, run a business, or feed your family unless you conform to this legally enforced Sunday worship.
By passing these laws, America will effectively force the entire world to honor the papal institution over the explicit written commandment of God, which mandates the seventh-day Sabbath. That is how the second beast forces the world to worship the first beast.
It's a terrifying rereading of the American future, but it raises a massive logistical question.
Yeah, if the Vatican's goal is total global dominance, and if they lost their overt military power in 1798, how are they pulling these geopolitical strings today? How do they infiltrate Protestant America? They'd need a completely different, invisible infrastructure.
Which brings us to the shadowy heart of the conspiracy. To understand their covert operations, the sources point to the parallel prophecies of Revelation chapter 17 and 18, where the imagery shifts from beasts to a harlot woman.
In biblical prophecy, a pure woman represents the true church, the bride of Christ. But a harlot represents an apostate, corrupt church one that commits spiritual fornication by uniting with the political kings of the earth.
Let's read a substantial portion of this scripture, because the imagery the sources pull from this is incredibly vivid.
Here is Revelation 17, verses 1 through 5. One of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and said to me, "Come, I will show you the punishment of the great prostitute who sits by many waters. With her the kings of the earth committed adultery, and the inhabitants of the earth were intoxicated with the wine of her adulteries."
Setting up the corruption.
Then the angel carried me away in the spirit into a wilderness. There I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was covered with blasphemous names and had 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman was dressed in purple and scarlet and was glittering with gold, precious stones, and pearls.
Very specific colors and wealth there.
She held a golden cup in her hand, filled with abominable things and the filth of her adulteries. The name written on her forehead was a mystery. Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of prostitutes and of the abominations of the earth.
And then verse 15 clarifies the setting.
Right. Then the angel said to me, "The waters you saw where the prostitute sits are peoples, multitudes, nations, and languages."
The authors draw a thick, straight line from this prophetic imagery directly to the Roman Catholic Church. Look at the colors. The woman is dressed in purple and scarlet. Those are the literal official colors worn by Catholic bishops and cardinals to this day.
Look at the wealth. She is glittering with gold, precious stones, and pearls, matching the staggering, almost incalculable historical wealth of the Vatican.
And the wine of her adulteries represents the false pagan doctrines like Sunday, sacredness, and immortal soul theology that she has forced the nations to drink, making them spiritually intoxicated.
The sources provide a mind-blowing visual artifact to back this up. They don't just rely on text, they point to archaeology. They highlight an ancient Roman coin known as the Dia Roma coin.
Minted around AD 71 in Asia Minor, which happens to be the exact region the Book of Revelation was originally sent to.
And what is on this coin? The coin literally features a woman sitting on 7 hills. The authors argue this was common knowledge in the first century Roman world.
Rome was famously the city of 7 hills. So when John describes a whore sitting on 7 hills ruling over the kings of the earth, his original readers knew exactly what visual he was invoking. It was the visual embodiment of Rome.
But notice the dynamic in Revelation 17. The woman isn't the beast itself. She is riding the beast.
She is holding the reins. She is operating in the shadows, directing the political and military powers of the earth. And this is where the sources dive deep into the secret operators of the Vatican.
If the papacy lost its overt political power, it regains control through secret societies. And the primary architects of this control, according to the documents, are the Jesuits, the Society of Jesus.
The sources focus heavily on this order. Founded by Ignatius Loyola in the 16th century, the Jesuits were established with one primary goal: to ruthlessly crush the Protestant Reformation and restore absolute power to the Pope.
The authors claim that today, the Jesuits are the ultimate shadow army. They operate entirely behind the scenes as an intelligence agency, subverting governments, controlling global financial systems, and assassinating political leaders who stand in the way of papal supremacy.
But they don't operate alone. The sources connect the Jesuits to an entire network of covert organizations. They bring up the Knights of Malta, and then they make a claim that completely twists standard historical narratives.
The sources assert that the Jesuits actually created the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry and later Shriner Freemasonry.
Yes, they do.
Wait, hold on. We need to stop here. Freemasons and Catholics have historically despised each other. There have been papal bulls condemning Freemasonry. How can the sources claim the Jesuits created them?
The authors argue that this historical animosity is a brilliantly crafted illusion. It's the concept of compartmentalization. At the lower degrees, Freemasons might believe they're just in a fraternal, philanthropic organization that opposes Catholic tyranny.
Ah, so the lower levels are kept in the dark.
Exactly. The sources claim that the Jesuits infiltrated and structured high-level Freemasonry, the 33rd degree and above, to act as a hidden global network.
A network to do what exactly?
To control powerful leaders across all nations, regardless of their public religion, politicians, central bankers, media moguls. The claim is that at the highest hidden levels of these secret societies, they all serve the Black Pope, the Jesuit general.
They manipulate world events, orchestrate wars, and consolidate wealth to drive all power back to the Vatican.
And the sources claim the Vatican itself is a monument to this secret pagan reality. They point to the architecture of St. Peter's Square. Right in the center is a massive Egyptian obelisk, a phallic symbol of ancient sun worship.
They mention the massive pine cone statues in the Vatican courts, symbolizing the pineal gland and occult awakening. They point to the Dagon mitres worn by the popes, shaped like fish heads, representing the ancient Philistine fish god.
The argument is that the Vatican hasn't just adopted some pagan customs, it is Mystery Babylon. It is the continuation of the ancient occult religion of Nimrod and Babylon, merely operating under a thin veneer of Christian terminology.
It's spiritual adultery. Let me read James 4.4, which the sources use to condemn these political and occult alliances. You adulterous people, don't you know that friendship with the world means enmity against God? Therefore, anyone who chooses to be a friend of the world becomes an enemy of God.
And Revelation 18, verses 1 through 3, outlines the final catastrophic fall of this corrupt system.
After this, I saw another angel coming down from heaven. He had great authority, and the earth was illuminated by his splendor. With a mighty voice he shouted, "Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great.
A total collapse.
She has become a dwelling for demons and a haunt for every impure spirit, a haunt for every unclean bird, a haunt for every unclean and detestable animal. For all the nations have drank of the maddening wine of her adulteries. The kings of the earth committed adultery with her, and the merchants of the earth grew rich from her excessive luxuries."
The kings and the merchants. The political elite and the billionaire class of the world, growing fabulously rich off their secret shadow alliances with this apostate system. It paints a terrifying picture of the modern world.
It does. But as sprawling and terrifying as the claims about the Jesuits, Freemasonry, and global finance are, the sources present one final claim that is, without a doubt, the most shocking of all.
I remember reading this section of the provided materials. I had to stop and reread it 3 times just to make sure I was understanding the accusation correctly.
The sources claim that the Vatican secretly orchestrated the creation of Islam.
Yes. The authors argue that the entire Islamic religion was not an organic spiritual movement born in the Arabian desert. They claim it was a weapon forged in the depths of the Roman Catholic Church.
How does one even begin to support a claim like that? Where does this come from?
The primary source cited in these fiercely critical texts is the testimony of a man named Alberto Rivera. Rivera claimed to be an ex-Jesuit priest who had been granted access to highly classified underground archives within the Vatican.
And what did he find?
According to Rivera, he was personally instructed by Cardinal B, who was the Jesuit general at the time, that the Catholic Church actually started Islam on purpose, using a Catholic woman named Khadijah to find a brilliant young man named Muhammad and groom him to be their prophet.
Okay, let's look at the underlying logic of this conspiracy. Why? Why would the Vatican, as a supposedly Christian institution, spend vast resources to engineer a massive new religion that openly denies the crucifixion of Jesus and calls the Trinity a blasphemy?
According to the texts, the goals were deeply geopolitical, militaristic, and entirely ruthless. They outline 2 primary motives. Number 1 is ethnic cleansing.
Explain that.
During the 6th and 7th centuries, North Africa and the Middle East were heavily populated by true Sabbath-keeping Christians and Jews who absolutely refused to acknowledge the authority of the Pope in Rome. The Vatican couldn't send their own armies down there without exposing their tyranny.
So the authors allege they created an Arab proxy army.
They gave them a new religion, inflamed them with zeal, and pointed them at the Sabbath keepers to commit genocide. They wanted to wipe out true believers in the region.
And the second motive?
The second goal was territorial and highly prophetic. The sources claim the ultimate secret aim of the popes for centuries has been to capture Jerusalem.
To what end?
The authors argue that the plan was to use the Islamic proxy army to conquer Jerusalem for the Pope so he could rebuild Solomon's temple, move his seat of power from Rome to the Holy Land, and rule there as the universal monarch, the literal Antichrist figure foretold in Scripture.
They engineered an entire religion to do their dirty work. But obviously, looking at history, if this was their plan, it massively backfired, right? The Islamic armies kept Jerusalem for themselves.
Exactly. The story goes that the Islamic armies became too vast, too powerful, and too independent. When the Pope demanded they hand over Jerusalem, they refused. According to the sources, this betrayal is what actually led to the Crusades.
Wow, so the Crusades weren't just a holy war.
No, they were the Vatican's desperate, bloody attempt to take by force what their created proxy army wouldn't surrender.
This sounds like ancient history, but the sources argue this connection didn't end in the Middle Ages. They claim this unholy alliance continues right up to this very moment.
Yes, and this is where the narrative synthesizes all its previous claims into a terrifying modern context. The authors state that the Jesuit-controlled Masonic networks actually control the top tier of Islamic leadership today.
They mention the House of Saud. They even specifically name figures like Osama bin Laden, claiming that at the highest levels, these men are high-level Freemasons operating under the ultimate hidden direction of the Black Pope.
So what is the modern implication of this? If they control both sides, what is the ultimate goal?
The goal is chaos. The sources argue that global Islamic terrorism is not random fanaticism. It is being fomented intentionally by these hidden powers. By orchestrating terror, endless wars in the Middle East, and chaos on a global scale, the hidden powers traumatize the global population.
They drive terrified, exhausted nations into the arms of the papacy.
Problem, reaction, solution.
Exactly. They create the terror, and then the Pope steps forward as the only moral authority capable of uniting the world for peace. The authors predict the world will willingly surrender its constitutional liberties, abandon national sovereignty, and submit to a unified, authoritarian global system headed by the Vatican simply to make the terror stop.
It is a breathtaking paradigm shift. We have covered so much heavy, incredibly complex ground today. Let's try to summarize the staggering architecture of the argument we've just unpacked.
We started in the ancient world with the metal statue of Daniel 2 and the four terrifying beasts of Daniel 7, establishing a rigid, chronological timeline of world empires. Babylon the lion, Medo-Persia the bear, Greece the leopard, and Rome the terrifying beast of iron.
We tracked the fracturing of that Roman iron into the 10 barbarian tribes of Europe. We watched as the little horn, identified by these authors, as the papacy rose up among them, uprooting the Heruli, the Vandals, and finally the Ostrogoths, to establish absolute political and religious dominance by the year 538 AD.
We did the prophetic math. The 12,260 literal years of papal rule, exactly predicted in Daniel and Revelation, stretching from 538 AD to the deadly wound inflicted by General Berthier in 1798. We explored the horrors of the Dark Ages, the Vatican's usurpation of the Sabbath, and their systematic, violent suppression of the Bible.
We discussed the unpardonable crime of translation and the tragic fates of Tyndale, Wycliffe, and Huss, who burned at the stake simply for wanting to put the Word of God into the hands of the common people.
We saw how Revelation 13 prophesied the healing of that deadly wound, mapping it directly to Mussolini and the 1929 Lateran Treaty. We painstakingly calculated the number of the beast, 666, finding exact mathematical matches in the official Latin, Greek, and geographic titles of the papacy.
And then the rise of the second beast, Protestant America, a nation that began as a lamb-like sanctuary of freedom, but is prophesied to transform into a dragon-like enforcer. We explored how it will allegedly unite with Rome through corporate-style ecumenical mergers to force the entire world to observe the mark of the beast through economic boycotts and National Sunday laws.
We delved into the mystery of the harlot woman riding the beast in Revelation 17, identifying the secret shadow mechanisms of papal control, the Jesuits, the Knights of Malta, and high-level Freemasonry.
And finally, we examined the shocking testimony of Alberto Rivera, exploring the claim that the Vatican intentionally engineered the creation of Islam as a proxy army to commit genocide against Sabbath-keeping Christians and secure Jerusalem for a future global theocracy.
It is a masterclass in conspiratorial synthesis, but as we wrap up, we must bring back our impartiality reminder.
Yes, very important.
We want to gently but firmly remind you, the listener, that this deep dive has been an exploration into a very specific set of fiercely critical texts. We have been reading their blueprint of history. We are demonstrating how these authors weave geopolitical history, secret societies, and ancient scripture into a singular, overarching narrative.
We are not endorsing these views. We are simply presenting the architecture of their arguments so you can understand it.
But whether you believe a single word of these sources or not, I want you to reflect on the core theme running through all of these historical claims. It's about the control of information.
Think about the unpardonable crime. Think about what it means for a powerful, centralized institution to hold a monopoly on truth, to burn books, to suppress translation, to enforce religious dogma by the power of state law. Historically, and even looking at the world today, controlling what people are allowed to read and how they are allowed to worship is the ultimate form of power.
It is the dividing line between a free mind and a captive one. If you can control a person's reality, you don't need chains to hold them.
Exactly. And I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over on your own. It builds on everything we've discussed today. The authors of these sources believe the deadly wound of 1798 was healed in 1929. They believe the mechanism for a one-world religion is already silently in place through ecumenical movements and secret societies. They believe the script is in its final act.
So the question they leave us with is this. If they are right, if this blueprint is accurate, what invisible geopolitical strings might they argue are being pulled in tomorrow morning's headlines to finally enact the ultimate mark of the world?
To the authors of these texts, history isn't murky. The jagged timeline is glowing right in front of us. They are pointing at the Roman Colosseum, at the Vatican obelisk, at the United States Capitol, and saying, there it is. It's up to you to look at the evidence. Keep digging, keep questioning, and never ever stop reading for yourself.